What is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Sean Jones NBA Show. I'm, of course, your host, Sean Jones. I know it's been a while since we've hopped on the pod, but I'm getting back into the thick of things, and I brought on a guest today to talk about the Trae Young trade to Washington that went down yesterday. And then after that, we will go through a segment I'm calling Mid-Season Superlatives. With that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, everyone. Today I am joined by an old friend of the podcast, fellow ball knower, and host of his own NBA show called Words with Wallace. We've got Nick Wallace hopping on to talk some hoops today. Nick, I hope you've recovered from your holiday hangover that I know I certainly had earlier this week, but how are you doing today?
We're surviving, man. I felt like we had corporate syllabus week the last 2 weeks. Now I'm really working again. Got to get back to the day job. But I appreciate you having me on, man. I've been lacking on my own feed, so you dragged me out of like a podcast hibernation. So we'll see if I can still deliver the takes that you need.
I have done a little bit of the same myself, which is partially why I reached out, because I was like, this will motivate me. I'll have a deadline I need to hit, and then we'll go from there. So glad I could get us both back on the mic. But cool. We had, when we initially talked about this, I was going to throw a few fake Trae Young trades at you. And the question I was going to ask is who throws in picks and how many? But there's no need for that, because we had a real Trae Young trade yesterday when Trae was traded to the Wizards, which had been rumored a little bit over the last couple days, if not week or so. Straight up for CJ McCollum's $31 million expiring contract and Corey Kispert, who's on the first year of his 4-year, $54 million deal. And there are no picks involved in this, which I think is probably a little bit surprising. At least it was for me. I know Trae's value has certainly fallen from what it was 2, 3, 4 years ago. But to see just how low the value was a little surprising to me, even with that. But I want to start on the Wizards side of the house. Do you like this fit in Washington for Trae? And do you think it was worth a flyer for them?
Absolutely. I'm definitely glad we started on the Washington side, but I think we can start positive here. This feels like a risk-free move for a team that has been desperately, at the very least, lacking somebody to put on the posters. Maybe I'm being a little disrespectful of the Alex Sarhive here. I know he's had quite the ascension this year, and he's a nice little player. But no, I think just giving you an option to have a primary ball handler that's been in big games and again, I think, going back to what you said in the first place about guessing how many picks, I definitely wouldn't have said 0 picks. I would have been wrong on that. Would have assumed there at least would have been one in there. I'm actually not too familiar with Washington's draft capital. I guess I see why they wouldn't want to trade their own first under any circumstance for a Trae Young. But either way, I just think it's, to give away 2 veteran players, I'm not going to act like, Kispert's actually kind of a nice player, and CJ McCollum on an expiring contract, you can do a lot worse than that. So I don't want to act like it's totally nothing, but to give up no draft capital and to get a primary ball handler, and I don't really have strong opinions on any of the guards that are in the rotation for Washington right now. I definitely don't see any of those guys as long-term solutions. And albeit Trae's obviously a flawed player, and that's why the market has soured on him so much, but if you're Washington, I can't think of one good reason why you wouldn't want to make this move, bring him into the building. I am waiting to see what this contract's going to be. If they give him a max deal, maybe I'd eat my words a little bit. But besides that, I really like it for Washington. What about you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is a no-brainer move for them, 100% worth the flyer. Because like you said, it's really no risk. I don't know how much Trae's going to play this season. The reports are saying that he may not play much.
Saw that. Didn't know if that had legs, but interesting.
Which, back to your point on their their draft capital, I believe they have a top 8 protected pick this year. So if they were to fall out of the top 8, it would convey to somebody else. So that could be some of the incentive there. Don't know if Adam Silver is going to maybe peek under the hood there. But regardless of how much he plays this season, it's basically a 1.5-year rental at the very most, you know what I mean? Where it's the worst case scenario there. And I actually think he really could do wonders for just helping improve a lot of the younger guys on this roster. you said you don't have strong opinions about the guards in Washington. I do have one strong opinion, and it is that Bub Carrington is not very good.
No, I don't think so either. I was about to say, I didn't mean to just fire a shot at like a random role player on a trash team, but I was like, yeah, I don't really see it. And besides that, it's like they don't really have a traditional guard on the roster at this point, right? Like you got Trae Johnson, and you got, you know, Keyshawn George can kind of be like a big forward, and I think he's one of the few keepers on the team for sure. But like, it is kind of weird though, because I don't really think about Washington too much, but like I was like, they might be the only team that like doesn't even have like a guy in that sphere where like, okay, that's their guy when the shot's winding down at the end of the close game. I know they don't play in many close games, but and I think Trae is a guy that, just because we have seen him play in big games, like this is the type of guy that you want to get when he feels slighted, right? I do think he's going to lock in. I think he's a productive player. Like, and you look at his like career ranks of where he finishes on like the Hawks like all-time like statistical leaders. It's like, yeah, this guy's not a bum. He's like 164 pounds, and he goes out there and competes. You know, even if you think he regressed a little bit from his peak a couple years ago, which, you know, age-wise wouldn't tell you that, I still think it's worth a swing. So I really just can't believe how much the market is soured on Trae Young, and this is coming from a guy that's been historically anti-Trae for teams that are actually in the mix. But I guess that's how you end up in this situation.
I've been historically pro Trae, but I will preface that in the sense that he is very much a contextual player. Like, I think a large majority of the league, he's just not a fit for, whether it be just positional fit next to other guys that are already there. Because there's a lot of really good lead ball handlers in the NBA right now, maybe the most there's ever been. But aside from that, I mean, the flaws are deeply documented between his lack thereof defensive chops. I mean, he doesn't have size, athleticism, or give that much effort, which, like, you could at least check the effort box if you're going to be that small out there trying to guard on the perimeter. We know he doesn't shoot it super consistently from the field. The three-point shot is probably a little better reputationally than it is in reality, and he hasn't been super willing to play off ball. But like I said, I still think in the right context, he is not only a good player, but a very good player with a specific set of unique skills. I will say he is one of only 2 active players in the NBA with 40% plus free throw rate and 40+% assist rate. I will put you on the spot if you can guess the other one, but
free throw and assist, I would have to guess Luka.
Yeah, it is Luka.
Okay,
exactly.
Let's go. So discount Luka. I mean, it's all connected on draft day, 2018, baby. Come on.
Exactly. So, and he's third all time in assists per game in the history of the NBA. So, like, he's one of the absolute best, not just like in the NBA, but like historically, the numbers say like ever in terms of just being an offensive manipulator, a true passer, playmaker, a pick and roll ball handler, a lob thrower. Like, Washington does not have anybody who's even average at those things. Even like 30th percentile on those things, like we mentioned. I mean, especially with CJ now off the roster, it's like, other than Bub, do they even have a true guard on the rotation outside of Trae Johnson, who's obviously more of an off guard, who I like, but I would not want him running an NBA offense, especially at the ripe age of 19 years old or whatever he is. And even the efficiency part with Trae, I will defend him again a little bit here. Again, you'd look at just the field goal percentage and 3-point percentage. It's not going to be pretty. But we have evolved past just those type of stats in today's NBA. If you look at his true shooting, which is supposed to be all encompassing, including things like getting to the foul line and what types of shots you're taking, he has a career 57.9% true shooting. For context there, the league average last season was 57.6. So his career true shooting is actually above what's the modern league average in the league right now. And just to name a few guys, he had a higher true shooting last year than players like Jaylen Brown, Bam Adebayo, Tyrese Maxey, Ja, Cade, Franz, De'Aaron Fox. He was within 1 percentage point of Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Williams, Lauri Markkanen last year. So he gets the rep as this uber inefficient player, but you can make up for efficiency in other ways. And one of them is by being elite at drawing fouls and being an elite free throw shooter when you get there, which, as we just laid out, like, he's one of the absolute best in the league at that.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're willing to, you know, and I appreciate you laying all that out to like actually, you know, put numbers to kind of what I've seen watching Trae Young for most of his career, right? Like, if you're willing to play Trae ball on offense, so to speak, like that's at least probably a league average offense. Obviously it depends on the supporting cast, but like you saw in 2021, like the rest of that starting lineup was like Bogdanovich, they had John Collins, they had Capella, and I'm blanking on who else they had on the wing there on that team, but like Herter, that's right. And so it was like 2 shooters, a couple lob threats, and then Trae. And like that was, enough. And look, it was a weak Eastern Conference. It was kind of a fluky run along the way, but like you still need there's only a certain number of guys on the planet that have the skill set to elevate your team to that point. And so I just think obviously, again, there weren't that many teams that are in a position, like none of the contending teams need that Trae ball offense. And it's certainly not worth it to, again, hide a guy that's smaller than me on the defensive end of the court. Like teams just know how to exploit that too well. But as far as Washington goes, I love it. But I am curious to hear what you think of the return for Atlanta, if you don't mind me turning the tables on you real quick.
Yeah, of course. I kind of feel like they were in an impossible spot here. I mean, I just think there really was no market, and I'm not sure what the alternative was. I mean, they could have kept him on the team, but obviously it seemed like there was a large cloud sort of over the head of the team and the franchise a little bit until this sort of was resolved. And if he wasn't going to get dealt, even going into the offseason, it was going to continue. If he picked his player option up, I just don't think the extension was coming is the point. And so with that being said, like you lose leverage when that happens. So I'll blame the front office a little bit for kind of putting them in the position to waiting so long. But I will say like the current front office is not the front office that waited this long. This regime took over the offseason. So they were kind of like handed the bad deck at the last second. But if just from the organization as a whole, it does kind of feel like they should have probably traded him like 1 or 2 years ago if they were going to trade him. And maybe they go the other route and they decide to re-sign him and they say, we're committed to Trae and blah, blah, blah. But if that's the case, you got to be really upfront about that. You got to give him the extension so that none of this sort of fogginess hangs over the team. But if you decide you're not doing that, then you always should trade guys early rather than late. And, it's a lot easier said than done. We've got other examples of this across the league right now where, John Morant seems to be maybe on the later side. Zion's on the later side. LaMelo, I still think might be in that sweet spot. So I would urge the Hornets, if they do not intend to re-sign him or move forward with him, now would be a good time to trade him. And it might seem kind of out of the blue, but they're going to find themselves in a similar situation. So I can't really blame the exact current front office because, like I said, they inherited this issue. I don't blame them for not wanting to give him a max contract because those are just really hard to build around these days if they're not like a true top 10 MVP level guy, which Trae just isn't even in his best case. But the organization as a whole probably waited a little too late. And so it is just a little disappointing on that front. But what do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you hit it on the head. Like, it's kind of unique to have a trade that I do feel like is this one-sided where, like, for Washington, I love it. For Atlanta, you're really disappointed in the return, but I'm not completely torching the front office because we're kind of in uncharted waters, right? First of all, you're right about the leverage play and I think I have this right. I think the Hawks were like 2-8 with Trae this year in like the 10 games that he played or in that ballpark. And so like, obviously in the non-Trae games, they're like a well above 500 team, probably hovering around like the four seed in the Eastern Conference, give or take. Like once everybody sees like, okay, Atlanta's way better without this guy, just that variable alone, the leverage is gone. And teams are way too smart these days. And when you layer that in with the fact that this new CBA and working around those massive contracts, like, I think any team would be more willing to give a guy like that, especially when you consider the fact, like, it's hard for me to bash him too much for waiting too long to trade the guy when he's 27. It's like he's 27 years old. He hasn't really had any like significant injuries. Like he still looks like mostly the same guy. Like, I'm watching these, 2021 highlights like that are popping up on my feed now that, this trade happens. And you remember that peak of his career when they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm like, yeah, like maybe he looks a little quicker, but it's basically the same guy. It's the same guy that could go out and put up those same stat lines tonight if you gave him the opportunity. So it's just really tough. It's really a sad day for the small guards out there. I think like Memphis is like shit. Cleveland, even with Garland, who I love, is like shit. Like
I like Garland too, but it's fair. Yeah.
It's a tough situation that I don't have that much, heat for the Hawks, so to say, especially because, they do have a little bit of time before the deadline here. A lot of people are suggesting this could be, the move before the next move that gives them more flexibility. They still have a haul of draft picks. Jalen Johnson looks like a stud. Their offseason looks great. So you're right. It's more of the fault of the previous regime, but I think it just kind of shows the development of the NBA combined with, new salary cap rules. And then you have the Hawks in a tough situation.
I'm glad you brought up the CBA part of this because I was actually going to ask you. I have a little bit of a theory that we are just in the midst of a major shift in how the NBA and teams at large value large salary players, because this is a trend now where Kevin Durant went for one single first round pick. Luka Doncic went for one single first round pick. Jimmy Butler went for one single first round pick. Trae Young went for 0 first round picks. It would be insane if I told you a year ago that those 4 guys would get, well, if I told you all 4 would get traded, you wouldn't believe me anyway. But if I told you they'd all be traded and there would be 3 combined first round picks returning in the deal, I don't think you would have believed me. And even for lesser guys, we look at, you're a Celtics fan, you know this well. Porzingis was simply a salary dump. Drew Holiday, simply a salary dump. Like, those are still good players. Like, I know Drew's on the older side. His contract's not great, but he looked phenomenal with Portland to start the year this year before he got hurt. Porzingis obviously has the weird illness, whatever's going on with him, but the Hawks have been really good when he has been on the court, and he's been a legitimate difference maker for them. And so these are good players that are not commanding any real sort of value back in deals. So do you think this is sort of the new normal with players that have these larger salaries?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I can't sit here and pretend I understand like where this is headed, but this is clearly a shift and a consequence of, the recent rule changes, because I'm honestly grateful that Trae got traded before this podcast, because I suck at doing fake trades now. I have no idea the value of anybody. Not that I was ever particularly well-versed in the trade machine, but I'm like, it's just so hard to predict what the value is going to be, because, if you told somebody from like the early 2000s that a guy that is like a walking double-double, 20 points, 10 assists, that's hard to come by, and a franchise player that you can put on the billboards, you selected him highly, all that stuff. He checks all those boxes, that he would just have to be like pawned off for salary when he's still in the prime of his career. Like, that doesn't even make sense. But, teams are just getting a lot smarter. It's becoming even more important to nail these draft picks, because that's like, cheap or, borderline free labor when you're comparing it to like, if you want to sign a veteran to even just fill a role on your team, you need to have a war chest of picks to land young guys that, want to play in 80 games and, can maybe do the same things as veterans straight out of college. So the entire landscape is changing. I don't know exactly where it's headed, but this is definitely, a consequence of a rapidly changing NBA landscape.
Yeah, totally. And obviously those players all had different circumstances from each other. So it's a little unfair perhaps to make them all like a 1-for-1.
Yeah, you said Luka, man. You can't put Luka
I know.
on any list.
But I also think this has something to do with the leverage factor as well. It's like when Kevin Durant was being traded, he gave a list of 3 teams. And it's like the Suns are sitting there like, all right, cool. So let's start bidding, guys. And they didn't want to fit. So it's like you end up with what you end up with. And Jimmy was the same way, where it was like the only 2 suitors really were Phoenix and Golden State, and Phoenix just could not make the deal without Bradley Beal being in it, and he wouldn't waive the no trade clause. So then you're sitting there like, Golden State's the only team, so like, why would they trade any more picks? And for Trae, it feels a little bit the same. I'm sure there was, honestly, I don't know if there was other teams interested. I had some names for us to go through before, like maybe Minnesota, but that was really hard with their big salaries. Like someone like Toronto, which they seem to always be kind of in the mix for these big salaries with like Quickly and something else. Like Brooklyn was reportedly not interested in him. Like there was a couple other ones I was going to throw out, but it's like none were really a clean fit. And I think the biggest part of this with the salary thing is that it's particularly difficult in season, when these teams don't have cap space or anything like that, because at least 10 to 15% of the teams are in the second apron. So they legally can't even make the trade most of the time. So it becomes so complicated, and we're just over time starting to see the different wrinkles of how the CBA is affecting the league.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's not to totally send us on a tangent, but like thinking about how difficult it is to pull off in-season trades, I think that's well represented by like the lack of buzz we've had around Giannis right now. Like Giannis is on a team that's outside the playoffs that, I don't want to spoil any future superlatives here, but like I am not bullish on the Bucks and their, chances of like turning it around here. Like he's sitting there, and it's totally different because we know he's a top 3 player in the NBA in the prime of his career. And like, I mean, again, I'm not the guy that's plugged in here, but I'm not hearing a lot of buzz, and it doesn't seem like he's very likely to be moved within the next month. And it's like, if you like, there should be one of the biggest bidding wars in NBA history for this guy right now. I know he's maybe a little bit older than what people want, but like resume wise, what else could you possibly be asking for a player that would ever be available? And it's tough. So I think, we're going to have a busy offseason like we always do, but I'm not expecting a lot of buzz around the trade deadline for the stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. But all right, that's a good segue. So the next segment we're going to go into is mid-season superlatives. These are for teams, not players. So Nick and I we have 10 different superlatives to go through, time permitting. We may not get to all of them, but we both have picked an answer and at least a backup in case we have the same answer for each of these. So starting off, I have a feeling I know who yours is for this. But maybe not. I could be wrong. But I do want to start off with biggest surprise. So a team that just has exceeded expectations, come out of nowhere, done something that you didn't necessarily anticipate. And so, who do you got?
Well, you're really just asking for me to be a homer right off the rip.
And
talk about my Boston Celtics. I will. I don't want to step on your toes, but I think both of us can be kind of thumping our chest a little bit here. Those are my two teams. But I'll start off with my C's, man. I really. Wasn't the most optimistic on this team heading into the season. I didn't know what to expect. I, definitely thought, if I had to pick, between them leaning into being more competitive or kind of going the other way, I thought there was too much talent on this roster for the Celtics to completely bottom out, kind of like what Indiana's doing. I know they're in a very different situation, but it did feel like a fork in the road moment for the franchise this offseason, having to offload Porzingis, having to offload Drew Holiday, and of course the Jason Tatum injury that we all saw unfold in the playoffs. But for this team, it does suck. We had a stinker last night at home against the Nuggets with, no Jokic out there. So that was tough, but we're still 8-2 in our last 10 games, 23-13 on the season, currently at the 3 seed in the conference. And it's becoming a real storyline of like, if this is what the team looks like now, obviously teams like Detroit have impressed in the East, but, everybody else is kind of swimming in the same waters. It just kind of begs the question, what does this team look like with Jason Tatum? How does the success of the team affect the injury return timeline? But I am just so pleasantly surprised with this group. I don't want to completely turn into Tatum without talking about how great Jaylen Brown has been, how our team has been able to scheme around a really weak front court, at least on paper, and the coaching staff being able to really maximize guys like Keita and Garza, and just the string of wings that we have that just like play like they've been caged up for years, and just have so much energy and effort out there. But it's a fun Celtics season. I will say that every game is entertaining, and the fact that we didn't have high expectations and we're sitting here at the 3 seed, and it's not exactly a small sample size anymore. Can't have much to complain about over here. So
yeah, that's totally fair. And to your point, the Celtics were one of my 2 teams that I picked as well. They were not the team I ultimately picked, which I'm sure was obvious coming into this, but I think I will take this one on the chin because I was particularly low on the Celtics this year, and I just did not see how they were going to be competitive defensively with the front court that they have, especially then when you look at the backcourt too, and it's like you're replacing Drew Holiday, one of the best perimeter defenders of the guard position, with Anthony Simons, who is one of the worst perimeter defenders at the guard position. So that's a pretty drastic drop off. We saw the same thing in Milwaukee when they swapped Drew for Dame, and it was just fell off a cliff from the point of attack defensive perspective. And then the front court in general, like you mentioned, like I thought they were going to have one of if not the worst front court rotation in the NBA, especially at the 4 and 5. And obviously Keita has been spectacular for them this year. 66%, 10 and 8. Like his on-off stuff has been really nice. They're a plus 5.6 on-off swing with him on versus off the court, which is one of the best on the team. And back to the defense, like again, they haven't been nearly as good this year as they have in years past. They're 15th in defensive rating right now, but I didn't anticipate them being so good offensively that would be good enough to survive. I mean, they're second in the NBA in offensive rating right now. They're first in 3-pointers made. They're first in terms of not turning the ball over. And like you said, Jaylen Brown has just upped his game to another level. And
a year 10 leap, dude.
I know. It doesn't happen very often. I mean, it was, to me, I was like, this could go one or two ways for him specifically, where I'm like, I thought it could get ugly. I mean, he did not have a very good year last year. His efficiency was the lowest it had been since actually like his rookie season in terms of just field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, true shooting, everything across the board there. And so like uh, it it felt like he had a little bit of a hangover after the finals run that he had, but he's bounced back in a huge way. And I think that game was a game 5 in the playoffs against the Knicks last year was a really good sort of like preview of what he can be when he's locked in the right way. I thought that was one of, if not the best game he'd ever played in his career, just in terms of him being a passer playmaker. But he's been so dominant in the mid range. I think a big thing for him too, he's shooting a career low 3-point frequency. Only 23% of his shots are coming from deep, and that's even lower than like it was as a rookie. So he's really leaning into being aggressive inside the arc, and it's really paid off for them. And then he's done such a good job of just spraying it out to the guys on the wings, and they're still playing a lot of, at least 4 out, sometimes 5 out offensive lineups, and it's been great for them. But I also do want to give big kudos to Mazzulla on this, because he's been, right up there for coach of the year in terms of just making these guys care and give a shit every single game and play hard and like make them have a chip on their shoulder. And it's been far better than I expected. I thought they were going to lean hard the other way, just in the sense where like if they started around 500, start to sputter a little bit, I thought they were going to be like, oh, Jaylen Brown, does your knee hurt? Like, and then starts to just like, because it's a golden opportunity, man. Look at Indiana. They're obviously terrible year, but they might get a top 3 pick this year. And you add that with Haliburton coming back, and it suddenly is like, wow, you're at a really good spot. And I thought the Celtics could be the same.
Yeah, I don't want to bash on Indiana too much, because their bed was kind of made when they had all those injuries at the start of the season that just made the decision easier for them. But I totally agree. I think if they started bad, like it would have been really easy, at least from the fans and just from like an organizational standpoint of like looking how good this team could look regardless next year, getting Tatum back to be like, hey, start resting guys, whatever. I would have been interested to see how that would have played out with Mazzulla, because he's such a psycho, and like organizationally it doesn't seem like we would ever want to lean into that. But lucky enough for us, we're playing well enough where like that's not even on the table. And now it's about when does Tatum come back, and what does he look like? And I do worry about that, because I did not want him to even return this year. I don't want him to return until he's fully healthy, but I just can't say enough good things about the team. And, just to toot the horn of the guys that, people that listen to this podcast might not be super dialed in on the Celtics. It just works when you have an alpha like Jaylen Brown playing at an all NBA level. You obviously still have everything that Derek White offers as like a number 2. Pritchard, I do really like him. I do think there's some games where he kind of disappears, and other matchups where it's like, oh my gosh, he can give you 30. But, with that kind of rotation in the backcourt, and then we just have guys between Gonzalez, Walsh, and, even Minot when he gets minutes out there that just play with such an energy. There's always one guy on the court that's like literally playing for his career and is a very willing on-ball defender. And, you scheme that all up with Mazzulla ball, and it's worked out nicely for the C's this year.
Yeah, it's all true. So my pick was the Phoenix Suns, which I think was obvious coming into this. But I mean, their over-under coming into the season was 31.5. They were picked to be at best 13th in the West. I would say most people had them in the 14 range. And if I told you that Jalen Green was going to play not even 2 full games into mid-January at this point, if I told you that their top 10 pick, Kaman Maluach, was going to play 75 total minutes through 37 games, that Booker was going to be shooting below 30% from 3 on the season, and that Dylan Brooks would shoot only 1 less field goal attempt per game than Devin Booker, you probably thought that the under was a lock. But
well, that's what I could believe in. But no, you're right. You're right. That does not set up for a team that has a winning record in the West.
Yeah, absolutely not. But here they are. They're in the 7th seed. They've been comfortably in the 7th seed for weeks now. They're 22-15. They started 1-4, so they're actually 21-11 in their last 32 games. They are 9th in defense after I'm sure you saw the famous back and forth between Ishbia and the Ringer, who wrote an article that said that they might have the worst defense in the league, which ironically enough, he tagged Bill Simmons, who did not write the article, but that's a story for
all
another
things
day.
Flow back to the top.
Yeah. But they've been a top 10 defense. They're 14th on offense. They're 10th in net rating. They are equally as close to the 3 seed in the loss column as they are to the 8 seed. So they are like, a quick win streak and then a couple, losing streaks from teams ahead of them, and they could easily get into the 4 or 5 range. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's at least within range. One other big thing is they're 6th in the NBA in clutch net rating. They're plus 15.9. So they've been really, really good in close games, which is honestly coming into the year one of the things I thought they would struggle the most with, even with Jalen Green, because I was like, outside of Booker, it is going to be really, really tough to get creation in the half court, and they're just going to send blitzes at him. And I believe he's top 3 in the league in terms of most blitzes seen, which makes sense. But the other guys have just stepped up in a way that I did not think was genuinely possible. Like Dylan Brooks, we touched on, like he has been, for all of the headaches that come with him, and let me tell you, there are headaches between like just stupid late game technicals. That there was a game that he basically cost the game from a late game technical. It was his second one, so he got tossed as well. Just not great shot selection all the time, but I'm telling you, like he is making a lot of very difficult shots that if he's going to make them at the current clip he's making them, then we kind of have to live with it. And also they kind of need him to take those shots without Jalen Green, because there's not a lot of creation still, even with the guys playing so well around them. Colin Gillespie has been a revelation. I mean, I love everything about that guy. He's making like 3+ 3-pointers per game. Like he's on pace for 200, 250 or something like that. This is a guy who was on a 2-way contract last year. Like this is his first ever real actual NBA contract. He's probably going to end up starting too many games, but to me, he's very much up there for 6th man of the year. We'll see when Jalen Green comes back. I assume he probably gets moved back to the bench, but legitimately, he's the guy I trust the ball in his hands most after Booker. Like when I literally have caught myself this year being like, oh, we need to get Gillespie back in the game, which is not something I thought I would be saying at any point when they signed him. Jordan Goodwin's been insane. He leads the team, and off they're a plus 8.3 better when he's on the court. He's making threes at a clip he's never made in the past. We know he's very good defensively. And then Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen, they've both been super solid. And then I want to go back to Jordan Ott because I think he is as deserving as anyone for Coach of the Year as well. Obviously, it's really impossible to know like how good a coach is going to be coming in, especially an assistant where we don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. But this team has such a different mentality, a different culture. It's honestly the opposite of last season. Like last year was toxic. They were apathetic. They looked like they didn't like each other. There was no buy-in. This year it is the other side of the spectrum where they look like they are super close. The culture is very clear. They play hard on both ends. Like everybody's bought in. Everybody knows their role. Everybody knows exactly where to be on the court. And so I'm just could not be more surprised, but also obviously as a fan, like more ecstatic with how the season's gone.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have not been dialed in the team the way that you have, but you know, for what I've seen, like Dylan Brooks has been so good, it actually made me ask the question, like if you just left everything else the same about last year's team and like, or you know, maybe they make some move around the fringes to acquire Dylan Brooks last year, like I actually do think that he, because of the way that the rest of the team has kind of adopted his mindset and like, just I've never seen worse body language from an NBA team than I did like late season Phoenix last year. Like we would DM about it, and it was terrible. Like, and so for what he's done to actually give them a defensive identity, in addition to the fact that he's like underrated, one of the better isolation scorers in the NBA this year, which is kind of unexpected. I mean, he always had the confidence, and now he's executing. I mean, yeah, this is exactly what you needed. Like, I don't think anybody had high expectations for this Suns team, but the fact that you know, Booker's still there. He's obviously locked up long term, and now you have an identity and maybe a few, you know, keepers and role players around him. And who knows, maybe Jalen Green actually comes back and gives another offensive boost. Like, I'm not actually optimistic the Suns are going to make noise in the playoffs, no offense, but I do think there is a path for them to get even better as the season goes along. And even if they just stay at where they've been at for most of the season now and they hang around and get a playoff matchup and get some reps and, you know, Book doesn't feel like he's wasting his career, then that's a massive win and light years ahead of where they were last year with, you know, unhappy stars, retread coaches, and dog shit body language. So,
yeah, they couldn't have said it better. One last thing I'll throw out with them, which is honestly a bizarre stat, but they've played 37 games and only 4 of them have been versus the East. So they have a lot of very winnable games coming up. Isn't that an insane split? I was shocked when I saw that. They played 33 of their 37 games against the West at this
Man,
point.
that's almost a little alarming, right? Like, does that mean they're just going to be on the East Coast, like road tripping all the second half of the season? I mean, I'm sure they got some home games, but God, that's tough. That is interesting.
No, it is crazy. But look, that to me says they have a lot of at least winnable games, and they have been taking care of business in the winnable games to this point. So let's move to the One Piece away team. This is a team that probably can't win it all right now, or can't make the finals, or however you want to define it. But if they added one piece, you think that they really could be in the mix to do so.
This is a fascinating one because I think to answer this question, you do kind of have to think about what teams are actual contenders right now. And it does feel like right now it's pretty open. Like, obviously, the East was projected to be wide open. And this year, outside of the Thunder and the West, there's a lot of teams that feel like they're in a similar tier. So I won't get into the contender tier too much. But the team that I had that's one piece away that I truly do believe, one move at the deadline, it doesn't even have to be anything too crazy. I had the Timberwolves here, which some people might say might be like a little disrespectful of a team that's been in the Western Conference Finals the past 2 years. But I just think that they are built for the modern NBA. I think they have the athleticism. I think they have the defense. I think they even have some of the depth. Maybe they are quite literally one piece away there. Like, a couple more bodies off the bench could go a long way. It doesn't seem like the Dillingham and experiment is going very well. And obviously, I think Conley's best years are well behind him at this point. But I think if they were able to bring in, preferably another guard, I know that's why you maybe suggest them for Trae Young that you can really trust. I'm not the biggest DiVincenzo guy, but I understand his value for that team. I think the Timberwolves could be really frisky. So I'll kind of leave it at that and see how you feel about that take.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good one. They actually were not in either of my top two. But I agree with you that despite the fact that they've made back-to-back Western Conference Finals, it kind of felt like both of those years, that was like their ceiling. Like they fulfilled their ceiling, but once they got there, they didn't feel close at all. They looked very overmatched in both of those conference final series. And so, like, could they make the Western Conference Finals again this year? Maybe, probably, depending on how the bracket falls. Last year they obviously got a little bit lucky getting to play the Warriors, who were 7 seed, but then Steph goes down. So, like, who knows if they would have made it anyway. But regardless, like, with injuries and how the bracket falls, especially with, the Nuggets could fall to the 4 or 5, have to play Thunder second round, whatever. So could they make the conference finals? Absolutely. But I have zero confidence in them to knock off OKC right now.
Exactly.
Which to me is like that, like, to your point, like, then they're not a real contender. If their ceiling is Western Conference Finals, I'm like, they're a fun second round playoff team that could get lucky and win an extra round, which is kind of what they've been the last couple of years, even though I don't want to disrespect them because they are a very, very good team. They are good on both ends of the court. Ant is, in my estimation, like a top 6-7 player in the league at this point, especially with guys being injured and whatnot. And so, like, they have a lot of talent. They're well coached. They defend. They have a go-to guy. They've got a secondary score, all of that stuff. But I'm totally aligned with you that, like, they do not have the ball handling and the requisite help for Ant in that backcourt that they need to, like, really get to that next level. And again, Conley was great in his prime, and honestly, prime Conley would be great for the team. But
exactly. Like the theoretical Conley is the guy that we need, to be honest with you. But
exactly, and then just Dillingham to me is just, I do not think he's a rotation player, especially in a playoff setting where he's the smallest guy in the court, can't defend at all, and isn't hitting shots at nearly a high enough clip to even, like, warrant being on the court. I mean, Bones Highland is getting minutes over him, which I'm like, maybe that should have been Dillingham's comp coming out of college because they play pretty similarly, honestly. But I've said this for a while too, because, like, it's not even just about, like, having another guy that can, like, take some of the wear and tear off of Ant to have to run the offense. But Ant, in my opinion, is probably, like, the best version of what we'll see out of him is as more of an off-ball player. Like, he's become so good as an on-ball guy, way better than I think anybody would have projected, even though he was the number one pick in the draft. He's had some tunnel vision at times. We've seen him get really frustrated when he's getting blitzed, particularly last year in the conference finals where he looked a little disengaged and whatnot. And so, like, just having somebody that can handle the ball, set him up, get him the ball in his spot so he's not having to do it himself all the time is just, I think, would do wonders for him. And they would get the best version out of him, the best version out of the team. And so I totally agree. I don't know who that player is for them. I think the guard trade market is pretty weak. Like a Kobe White could be interesting. But again, like I don't know if he's quite good enough where I'm like, yeah, they can beat the Thunder now. Like I don't know if the player's out there.
Totally. I was actually thinking the same thing, like go as you were saying it out loud, because again, not very good at the trade machine these days. I'm like, I wish Fred VanVleet was healthy. Like, I think that's like the type of guy that, like, you know, you or you look around the league, or it's like, man, maybe if they had just found a way to keep Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I know he's more of a scorer right now, but just having another guy that they, you know, really trust in the defensive end that can still get you a bucket. But no, we saw that matchup against OKC, and it just felt like they were very similar teams. That's why every time they play in the regular season, it's like must-watch TV. Like, it's so fun. I think they both, like, they fit, the Timberwolves fit the meta, so to speak, of this NBA that's just driven by athleticism and defense and guys that are willing and able to play 82 games. But the Thunder are just like a different class of that team, right? Like, Shea still feels like a level above Ant. I honestly think that's actually like the least of the problems between the team, because I think Ant could actually be closer to Shea than people realize. But it's just, you know, the options that OKC has around Shea, I just feel a lot better about. And I just, that's why the Timberwolves, I love them as a team. It wouldn't shock me if they made it back to the conference finals, but as a team, I would take seriously to go all the way. I don't see it right now with how the West is stacking up.
Yeah. The team I picked is different, but a little bit similar in terms of the thing that I think they need, and it is the Houston Rockets. I know that they've looked really good this year, and you know the concern coming into the year when they lost Green and Brooks, and then VanVleet goes down, was the offense. And that's been their issue over the last few years. We knew they were going to defend. Udoka is going to get the best out of them on that end, but they're third in the NBA in offensive rating right now with 121.5 rating. So like on paper, you're like, well, that's not an issue at all. Like, I mean, they're one of the best offenses not only in the league right now, but historically, like ever, based on that number. But I think there's context to everything. And the reason that number is so high, if you actually watch them, is because they are rebounding the ball on the offensive end at a historical pace. They're first in the NBA in offensive rebound percentage at 37.7%. For context, they were first last year. They are 6% higher than they were last season. They are on pace for the highest of the 21st century by multiple percentage points. So this is like legitimately the most insane offensive rebounding team we've seen in at least 25 years. And so I'm just a little skeptical that like they are relying heavily on that to be so efficient offensively. And so can you win an NBA championship on getting your own misses and putting the ball back? Like I don't have a stat for this, but I would love to know what their offensive rating is on like per shot, if that makes sense. Like I bet it's not good.
Totally.
They're getting their own miss almost 40% of the time. It's like, well, of course they're going to score. I mean, they can have not even a great field goal percentage and continue to do that. And like they are good otherwise. You know, Şengün, I think, has taken a step up this year. Kevin Durant's obviously been very solid for them. But watching some of these late games, it just feels like they're really KD reliant. And as someone who's watched a lot of Kevin Durant over the last few years, like he, to me, is at the point of his career where like, yes, he can go get you a bucket, but I don't know if he's a true run the offense through him offensive engine the way that like a Luka is or a Shea is or even an Ant is at this point of his career. Like, again, he's going to make shots, but he's going to make difficult shots. He's not really like manipulating the defense to open up guys in the corner. You know, he's like, I'm an ISO and get a shot. And it's like, cool. And teams are going to live with that. And he's going to make it at a higher percentage than most other players will. But he's not bending the defense. And that's the kind of thing where I'm like, can a guy who doesn't do that really carry you all the way to the finals when they don't really have another reliable guy in the wing or in the backcourt that can support there?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I had Houston as like the number 2 team on my list here. Like the tricky thing and the reason I went with Minnesota is like I still don't know exactly what the Rockets need. Like, yes, theoretically, it's like that extra guard that you trust and whatnot. But I'm also not sold that Houston's not already a contender because they obviously have had some injuries, right? Like, Eason's a really big guy for them that's missed most of the season. I know he's back now. Şengün is missing a good chunk of time now and whatnot. But, and there's also paths where, like, look, like maybe Reed Shepherd really is that guy. It's a lot for him to make a leap. Like when this is, feels more like his rookie season than his second season with how little he played. But, he has those flashes of like on ball creation, and he definitely has like the energy and like want to like take and make tough shots and create for others. And, if a man like, it's tough without the lack of gravity from like his lack of jump shooting, like what that does when he's off the ball and whatnot, but he's still such a unique player. And like, I can't stop watching that guy. Like he's just there's really nobody else like him besides maybe his twin brother. Right. But, beyond that, like, I do think there's a world where they get to becoming a contender as it is. But yeah, I think if they were to make one more move, I could absolutely see like pushing my chips in on Houston, especially if, OKC continues to slide a little bit here.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. And part of why I picked them was sort of for me to be able to say that I actually don't really think they're a true contender as currently constructed. I think they are a tier below, even like Denver, for example, just because I do still like, again, the numbers say, I know what the numbers say, but the eye test tells me that they're relying on like a very unique way of doing it. And I'm not saying it definitely can't translate, but when I haven't seen that kind of thing translate to a postseason like in my lifetime. And I'm not saying it can't, like I said, but it just doesn't feel like very modern NBA to me. And maybe I'll be wrong. I'll also say they're getting some very uncharacteristic shooting performances from role players. Okogie is a career 30.8% from three, shooting 41% this year. Tari Eason was leading the NBA in three-point shooting going into last night before he had a off night, and he's still at 47%. I'm like, consider me not confident that those guys are going to continue at those rates. I mean, like, I'm a big Reed Shepherd guy. He's shooting 44% or something like that. I'm like, is he going to keep doing that? Like, I think maybe that one's slightly sustainable, but even if he shifts down to 40%, and then those other guys shift down to, closer to their career averages, it's like, then the shooting becomes a real issue because like, I don't know who's making jump shots consistently from the outside other than Kevin Durant on this team. And that was one of my big concerns preseason. And they've gotten guys to make shots, but again, it feels like a lot of like outlier seasons. So to the question of who it would be, again, I don't know if that player's out here. I think a preseason, a lot of people after the Van Vliet injury were hypothesizing Derek White could be a good fit. Again, obviously, I do not think that's going to happen at this point. I wonder if a Drew Holiday, when he comes back, could be on the table. I think that would be a really good addition for them. Again, Kobe White, he's kind of like a glorified Reed Shepherd, if we're being honest. So I don't know if that's exactly what they need. And I was like, maybe, just maybe. I was just trying to get like creative with it. I was like, could they throw 3 or 4 first round picks at like a Andrew Nembhard or something and like prime away? And I'm like, maybe, but I'm like, that's probably not smart to give up that kind of capital.
Yeah.
But I guess I just don't think Indiana would move him unless they got a big overpay. But I don't know.
That's funny because like a guy like Nembhard who's like making cheap money and is like really effective, like he's somehow more valuable than like Trae Young. It's not even close. Like it's just
exactly
trying to adjust to that. Like is insane.
It's
but
crazy.
Houston's so tricky because their best 3 players and Amen and Katie and Şengün are such unicorns, and it's like there's no like there is no comparison for them. So it's like it could work, and especially when you throw in the size of the rest of the team. So they're a fun one. I am excited to watch them down the stretch to see how it works out.
Next one, we'll shift to biggest dark horse contender. So a team that, probably is not going to make the finals, but you think could be a candidate to make a Pacers-esque type run if everything fell their way.
So this is I had to have a stretch goal here, right? If I'm a sales guy, everyone's got a stretch that they need to hit, right? This is a stretch that we need to put in place right here because look, I think it's there's only 3 or 4 teams at any time that feasibly could win it, but I think what we saw last year, especially when you're saying Pacers-esque run, that's about as crazy as it gets in the NBA when there's you have to beat a team 4 out of 7 times to actually advance. So all that being said, I'm going to say the Dallas Mavericks. They would be my super dark horse in a perfect world. I think that's the team that could actually make a run as soon as this year. I don't fully believe that, but I just think the ascension that we've seen from Cooper Flag and 3 months into the season, 3 months into his career is just ridiculous, and they're clearly still asking him to do way too much. That being said, Anthony Davis looks good when he plays, like always. He's AD. Like, you know, if you want to pick nits, go for it. But I still mostly see the same guy on a night-to-night basis. And then, again, they have that little, you know, that secret weapon in Kyrie coming back eventually, who, you know, even if you're asking him to do a little bit less, he's still such a great off-ball shooter and has such gravity as a player. It's not a Trae Young situation where you're asking Kyrie to just run everything. Like, I don't know, man. Like, there's a reason that Dallas was in the finals just a couple years ago. Like, I know that they could easily go the other direction. We might not ever see Kyrie, Cooper Flag, and AD ever play a game together. They could absolutely go the other way within the next couple of weeks here. But I'm of the camp that I just think that this team has enough talent and they have the luxury of having their timeline extended with Cooper Flag that you might as well see it through for the rest of this season and see if you can get frisky when Kyrie comes back.
I'm not going to lie to you. I was not expecting that one.
That was tough. I had to look down. You have to scroll down to the teams that are like outside the play-in race. But, you know, if we're going to get wild, we're going to say dark horse. I mean, that's what we're going with. I think they're more likely than like, you know, like a Golden State or, you know, maybe a team above them, because I just feel like the upside and the size and the defense that they have is scary. It's just a matter of if they want to actually put their pedal to the metal to get there, because it would probably take, you know, another trade going the other direction too, in addition to getting Kyrie back. But there is a world where the Mavericks are extremely competitive, and I just want to make people aware of that.
I just think the hole's too big with where they're at right now. I think they were 5-15 or something to start the year. Like, their best case is probably sneak into the 8th seed or something like that, where I'm like, well, toughest matchup in the first round. So
yep.
I don't know. I will give you kudos for
thinking outside the box, you know, partial credit.
For going very bold, but I don't have much to say to that, only because I do not agree that they have any shot in any capacity. Like, I think that's more likely. Well, obviously, I'm sure you think it's more likely they go the other way too, but I'm just saying, like, I think it's nearly 0% chance, and I think that's. I'll preface that I was very low on Dallas going into the year. Like, I was going to have them like out of the play-in completely, but I got kind of like sucked into the juice a little bit. So I had them like 10 seed, I think it was.
Yeah. But I think I was in the same exact boat.
Yeah. But like, I have continued to say this, that I do not believe Kyrie's going to play this year. There's actually a report today that they were like, that basically said that he might not play this year, which I don't know why people are so adamant that he was going to play. I just like it's a serious injury, and when it happens late season, it just tends to they don't play the next year. Jamal Murray got hurt around almost the same time, and he missed the entire next season. It was the same injury, so I don't think he's going to play. Anthony Davis, I'll throw this stat out at you that I actually pulled for another one of these if I can find it. Oh, here we go. Anthony Davis has played 28 out of 70 possible games for the Mavericks. So little tough to expect him to even be on the court at all. Be 33 by year's end. And I just think the roster has no balance whatsoever, especially, I mean, without Kyrie, it's like they don't even, Brandon Williams has been their best guard, which is like, I don't even think they were planning for him to be in the rotation to start the year. With all that said, I'm a huge Cooper Flag fan. I think he's going to be multi-time All-NBA level player. I mean, he's been ridiculous. I mean, he got off to a little bit of a slow start, but like considering his age, I mean, he just turned 19 like in the last couple of weeks. So like he's so young and already has such a feel for the game that you just can't teach, and all the additional, you know, things like shooting and just getting more polished with his handle, like that stuff's going to come, but all the hard stuff is out of the way for him. So not a knock on Flag. I just think the infrastructure of that team is not.
I mean, they're only 9 games under 500. You could live a little bit, Sean. Come on, dude. But no, I get it. I just wanted to sketch out the outline that I just
totally fair.
I can't. Maybe it's
like I applaud it.
Yeah, maybe it's just like still like a lack of acceptance around that trade, because like that was a team that has the pieces and like the role players in place, even with the Lively injury, where it's like, I could talk myself into this team. It's just, you're right, they're in a massive hole. That's not gonna happen. But
they've got the talent, and I'm just saying, like, if they were fully healthy and they moved Gafford for like another guard, like a shooting guard that I trusted or something like that, another ball handler, then I could maybe get there. But like, it's a lot of ifs that unfortunately, like none of them are going to happen. So
definitely.
Okay. I'm gonna actually switch mine a little bit. I feel like I have to go like slightly bolder since you said that. So again, this is not nearly as bold. My original pick was going to be the Lakers, but I'll go slightly bolder just because it's not very fun to pick.
Can't follow this guy up. I get it.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to go with the Orlando Magic, actually. They were a team that I preseason had as a sleeper to make the finals, not just conference finals, but actually like represent the East. And I still actually believe this. This is not me like trying to get bold, even though I said that. Like I do genuinely believe that Orlando is a top 3-ish team, in terms of threats to make the finals out of the East. And the East, it kind of sucks, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Like, it's not very good. And, they're not very good right now. I think they're 21-15 or something like that along those lines. And they've been banged up. They started 1-4, but they had a nice little 14-6 stretch. They're 6-7 since. But I would blame a lot of their struggles on the fact that they have just not been whole. Franz has missed 13 games. Paolo's missed 10. Suggs has missed 14. I talked a bit about this preseason as well, but the Magic, they are 43-26 coming into this year when all three of those guys play. That's 51 win pace, even before they add Desmond Bain to the mix, even before Anthony Black makes a little mini leap. And so I believe in this team when those guys play, and the proof of concept is there. They're starting five, which, I feel like it's got a lot of bad like PR in terms of like, it's clunky. They play well together, blah, blah, blah. Starting five of Suggs, Bain, Franz, Paolo, and Wendell Carter is the fourth best net rating 5-man lineup in the NBA with at least 100 minutes. They're plus 18 with those five guys on the court. And for all the talk of their offense, they have a 122.6 offensive rating. So when they have been whole, they have been very good. It's been inconsistent. They haven't had like all their guys that much. But this team, when those guys have played, they've been 50-win pace for multiple seasons worth of sample size now. And, they've looked like competitive in the playoffs. I know they haven't won a series yet, but I can't get out of my mind 2 years ago with Game 7, taking Cleveland to Game 7 and Paolo's second season, and he's averaging 28. And like, I've seen the proof of concept of what it could look like when everything clicks.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. I think that if somebody actually was like, hey, put a gun to my head and picked, like, you have to name a team that's outside the top 5 odds. First of all, you have to pick a team in the Eastern Conference because I think there's like 5, one, two, three. Yeah, 4. I'd say there's 5 teams in the Eastern Conference, and Orlando is one of them where, like, I wouldn't be completely blindsided if they'd made the finals. And then when you're in the finals, you could, even then, I'd be pretty shocked if they beat whoever's coming out the West, but you're, a 2019, we'll say a turned ankle of a star situation away from, walking your way to the trophy. So it's like, I totally see it. The biggest thing I'd say against it, in addition to the fact that they started really poorly, is just, at this point, I feel like you're going to need to donate both knees and all of your leg muscles to Jalen Suggs at this point to get him to actually stay healthy. I love that guy. I mean, he just plays like an absolute maniac, and that like just makes it worse. It's like a multiplier when he's like diving after balls. It's like, yeah, no shit, you're going to get hurt, dude, but you're also made of glass. But he's also so important to their offense. And so I really like Orlando. I was pretty disappointed with how their season's gone so far with them only being the 6th seed, but there's a lot of ball left. I think they'll finish a lot better than that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, they actually flashed a little bit in that series in the first round against the Celtics last year. Paolo looked better in that series against the Celtics than he has this year, but he's still really young and time for him to develop. And they have a very unique team as well. So I definitely don't hate that take at all.
Let's move to the most obvious blow it up team. And I want to go first on this one because my pick
keep
for
stealing
this,
the show. Hey, I get it, man. It's your pod. I'll lay out. No.
Only because it's on topic. My pick for this was the Dallas Mavericks.
Okay. All right. Let me hear your case.
I'll say this. I originally had thought the Kings, but they have invented a new way of tanking where you don't actually have to trade any of your veteran players. You can just be very bad with them. So why blow it up when you can be 8-29 with a minus 11.5 net rating with all of your veterans? So that was kind of why I pivoted off of them, because I was like, well, probably going to be a top 2 pick even with the guys. So, but for Dallas, they've started to win a little bit. They're 14-23. They're 9-8 since their 5-15 start, but they're still 23rd net rating. They're 28th in offensive rating. The Cooper Flag point guard thing was kind of, I won't say disaster, but it was like close to a disaster. And I don't mean that as a knock on Flag, because I think he's phenomenal. I think it was an impossible situation to put the guy in at 18 years old. And I said this preseason too. I was like, this is going to be bad. And hit that one on the head there. But
Yeah.
they're 29th in 3-pointers made, 27th in 3-pointers attempted. So just the offense is clunky. They don't space the floor. They don't have enough creation. They don't have enough ball handlers. And so the case for them to blow it up is, what's their best case? Let's say Kyrie doesn't come back. Then they make the plan as maybe the 9 or 10 seed. And let's say they sneak into the 8 seed. Then they're going to get swept by OKC. That is the best case scenario for this team. So why I think they should blow it up is because AD's value is not going to go up. As I mentioned, he's played 28 out of 70 possible games with the Mavericks. He's 33 years old by year's end. He looked a little almost like, I won't say overweight, but a little chunky coming into the season.
Oh, he's thickened up, yeah.
Yeah, he's looked a little
That's Texas
slower
barbecue, baby. It's no
I
joke.
know they got something in the food down there, but he's just looked a little slower, out of shape, hasn't been quite as good as we've seen in previous years. But the number one reason for me by far is because they have their first round pick this year, and they do not have their first round pick again until 2031. So if they do not secure that top 5 pick this season, they will not do it again for at least 5 years. And at that point, Cooper is going to be, 24, which is not that young, but like the clock's ticking on that next contract and whatnot. And I'm looking around, and Lively's really the only other young guy that I particularly like on this roster. And while I love Derek Lively, but at the end of the day, his best case is a role player, and they need guards to be able to set him up. And Flag obviously can do a little bit of that, but they need that reliable ball handler that we talked about. And so the hardest part of a rebuild is securing the cornerstone player. They already have Flag, but if you have the opportunity to get 2, like the rebuild, like who cares about those picks? If you get Darren Peterson alongside Cooper Flag, I'm like, whatever. Like, who needs those picks? We've got the 2 guys that we need. Like, assuming he pans out as people think, but like, that's your future for the next 10 years. Unless they get a Nico Harrison 2.0. But we'll talk about that when it comes. But I just don't think you can turn down the opportunity to pair Flag with another top, because this draft is really good. I mean, even if you get the 4th pick, like Caleb Wilson is supposed to be super good. Boozer's, I guess, not the best positional fit with Flag, but like you figure that stuff out later. Like, exactly. But if you can get 2 of those talents on your team, it's like you're set. Your rebuild is basically over. At that point, all you're looking for is role guys and guys that fit around these guys and complement them and make up for some of their weaknesses. And that is so much easier to do than get the centerpiece. So to me, that's my case for it, is like, it's now or never. Like, don't try to go for it this year and then trade AD in the offseason and be like, no, we're going to tank. It's like, well, you don't have your pick for the next 5 years. So good luck with that.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I definitely see the argument with the pick side of it, because I was aware that this was the year that they have their pick, and I guess they are already in quite a hole. I just think it is so difficult to rebuild in the season. You know what I mean? And actually like tear apart these guys, where it's like, you might as well like see through the bones of this team that was in the finals just a couple years ago. And now you have this new generational player in the mix who I think can immediately, perform at the highest stage if they were to actually make it to the playoffs. So I definitely see both sides, because I think that's a great argument. And especially when you're right, like besides Cooper Flag, I would say that Lively is the only one on a similar timeline that might have long-term value. And to be honest with you, I've soured quite a bit on Lively, no fault of his. But like, when you got a 7-footer with foot issues that are reoccurring like this,
I can't say.
And his superpower was already playing next to Luka. Like, I'm not like super bullish on him either. So I totally get it that they do have a long road ahead in terms of like building around Cooper. Like, there's worse problems to have because Cooper's in the building. But my kind of argument is just that, like, you might as well, like, it's going to be a long road. Like, you have this timeline with this 19-year-old. You might as well give this year a shot while you have the pieces in place, assuming Kyrie plays. So that would be the only way that I push back. And it is just so hard to, if they do have suitors out there for AD, and, maybe you can even pawn off like a Klay Thompson, a D'Lo, a PJ Washington, whoever, man, like, by all means, go for it. I don't really know if the market's going to be there for those guys. So I'd rather just kind of see what this infrastructure looks like, instead of trading these guys for 50 cents on the dollar.
Fair. And I think where I'm mostly coming from is that, like, just trade Anthony Davis. That's kind of more what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Because again, I think he's a ticking time bomb to the point where, like,
That's
one more kind of serious injury, and you're going to have to be giving up picks to get rid of him. because I mean, I know he doesn't have a lot of years left, but like still, he's a big salary, and it's still a huge risk to take him on in any capacity. So that's kind of where my head's at. I'm cool if they hold on to Gafford, Washington, D'Lo, Clay, whatever. But if they get Anthony Davis out, I don't think they're going to be very good because they have not been very good without him.
Yeah.
And so that's enough to kind of justify that. But
I guess that's fair. I think I thought the Mavericks had a better record in my mind because I see these flashes of like a good team, but you're right. If you take AD off that team, yeah, they definitely have. And it does make sense that obviously Davis has been, playing more consistently recently and whatnot. You're right. But if you pull that, Jenga block, so to speak, I do think I was kind of thinking, I'm like, Flag might be so good that like they still might be all right, even if they trade him. But I just I might be just drinking too much Flag Kool-Aid here in Dallas. They got it in the water, so that's on me. But
okay, well, we probably talked way too much Dallas Mavericks on this. So
yeah, we did
for this one.
For my blow it up team. This one was interesting. I ended up going with the Grizzlies for this one.
Okay, I like
just
that.
because I think the Grizzlies have been so hot in the draft with like not sexy draft capital that I'm like, let them cook with a couple lottery picks, right? And I don't think they're that far away with them being, very similar record to the Mavericks. They're 16-21, the 10 seed in the West. I just, again, similar to the market with Trae, like it's going to suck if you have to take a huge discount on Ja. I have to imagine that, and I really don't like Ja Morant, but I have to imagine he would get you more than Trae Young still, just because, I don't know, maybe the ceiling's a little higher.
I don't know.
You're right. Like I just refreshed his stats and saw 20% from three and threw up in my mouth a little bit, but so maybe not. I mean, but I do just think that they at least have some keepers in the building. Like they don't have the cornerstone by any means, but like Howard's definitely going to be a real guy. Like Zach Edey's actually really impressed me this year. Like Jalen Wells, Spencer. I think that's kind of like a core that like just let them, like they could really bottom out too. If they get rid of John Morant, if they find a suitor for Jaren Jackson, like they would immediately stink really bad and they would shoot to the top of the draft order. And this front office has given me, signs to believe in the long-term future and culture around this team. So for me, it's just like there's two eras in Memphis. It's like they have Ja and Jaren hanging on, and then they have this new crop of guys that they've been able to populate in, but they're still kind of in no man's land. Like if Ja and Jaren continue to play, they could fight up to a 10 seed, and I would have even less faith in them as like a 9 or a 10 seed than I would even Dallas, because obviously I'm
I'll agree with you
Dallas,
there.
so.
The ceiling on Dallas is higher, at least.
Yeah, there we go. A little win.
I'm gonna have to go in the transcript after and see how many times we said Mavericks or Dallas on this, but
I promise that's the last one. I hope.
Well, we'll see. No, I'm kidding. Question for you though, when you say sell off, are you talking Ja and Jaren both? One of them? Like, what? How do you envision a rebuild for Memphis going? At least, even just a sell off rather than a full rebuild. But
yeah, see, I was always never that high on Jaren Jackson Jr. And last year he played so well that he actually convinced me, and like his
I've always been kind
unorthodox
of a
way of like. Yeah, and now I like feel like I bought stock at like the worst time. I bought stock at peak value and it's plummeted right now because it's like now like the rebounding flaws are even more obvious than ever before, and like the fact that he is like not quite the guy that he works best next to like a traditional 5, and it's like now that they have it needy, maybe you want to keep him. I just think the first piece is getting rid of Ja. I'd say it's more urgent to get rid of Ja than Jaren Jackson, just to really turn this over and kind of embrace like this next generation of Grizzlies basketball. But I'm not really sold on Jaren as a keeper either, to be totally honest with you, just with the flaws that he has as a player. And I just think that they're really going nowhere fast. I mean, they have paid Jaren, so it does feel like that's a situation where his contract's so big that probably affects his market, where there's not going to be as many suitors for a Jaren Jackson Jr. But I just feel like they'd be better off going like full Utah the past couple years, because this front office has proven they can draft, and they have a few guys that I like where they could actually really develop the guys that they have in place, give them a full allotment of minutes, give them a full workload, and then you would develop them at the same time that you're also going to be getting like 20 wins at best.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it would be very interesting to see Cedric Howard in a more expanded role, which, I mean, he's gotten some of that this year just because Ja's been in the lineup, which is nothing new. But on the Ja Morant front, the thing with him and Trae, like, I'm not totally convinced he'd have that much better of a market. And the reason I say that is because the on the court concerns are like, we mentioned that Trae kind of looks like the same Trae when he's been healthy. Like that, you
Yeah.
cannot say the same for Ja.
No,
Like
you can't.
the at rim finishing, like efficiency's way down, the frequency's way down, shooting more jump shots, and he's getting less efficient at that too. Like I don't know in a playoff setting, like what does a John Morant offense look like? Like it feels like it might be pretty ugly. Like even in a better situation where he's playing full time and bought in, and like I don't know, just these guys that rely so much on athleticism with small guards, like they just typically don't age super well. And I know he's what 26, 27 or something like that, but like, you know, what would I be shocked if he was like totally washed by like 30, 31? Like I wouldn't, to be honest. So if
Yeah.
you're trading for him, it's like, what is this, a 2 year like prime when he's making like a close to max salary too? So I don't know. It gets kind of complicated. I do think Jaren almost could make more sense to trade just because like I think his value is probably the highest it's going to be, which is kind of what they did with Bane too. And so like I think Jaren could probably fetch him like 3 firsts or something like that, just because contract's a little bit more palatable than
Yeah.
Jaws. But I will say it's a hefty contract. I remember when they gave that out, I was like, oh, that's a little high for my taste for Jaren
Totally.
Jackson. When, like you mentioned, I mean, like the rebounding stuff is a real concern, especially when he doesn't have a reliable, like bulky big next to him. And then offensively too, I'm like his at rim finishing this year is like really, really not good. Also, he's like one of the worst finishing big men in the league. And like his 3-point shooting is wildly overrated. I mean, like he's very sporadic year to year. Sure, he's had a couple years where he's in the like 38, 39 like range. He's also had some years in the 32, 33 range where I'm like, it's just not consistent season to season. And like he's this theoretical floor spacer, but if he's shooting 33% on any given year, it's like, well, he's just taking a bunch of bad shots at that point. He's not providing much offense elsewhere. So I agree. I've always been a little lower than consensus on Jackson. I mean, I think he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. Like what he does defensively can't be replicated by most other teams or most other players. But the idea that he's some like all-star guy, like I think he's just a tick below that and more in the like complementary role to a couple other all-stars.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely going to have more value, and more teams be willing to sign up to plug in his skill set into a winning basketball team than Ja, for sure. I just think in the perfect world, you obviously move on from both, just so you can really turn the page, and then you'd be the favorite to be bottom of the standings and wins for the foreseeable future too, which would get you a nice draft capital right there.
Yep. Cool. Next, we'll move to biggest disappointment. And I will let you go first on this one.
Well, this one, I'd be pretty shocked if we didn't have the same team here. Be pretty tough to make any argument besides the Cleveland Cavaliers, in my opinion.
Oh, I did have a different answer.
Actually. Okay, let's go. I'm interested to see that. I mean,
they were the Cavs were my second team, but I do have another one.
Okay. And look, there's a lot of season left. That's what I should preface it, especially in the Eastern Conference. Like if the Cavs were to rip off a run here, I don't think it would shock anybody, but for them to just be like 4 games above 500, they're currently the 7 seed in the Eastern Conference. And like, I know, Garland's been banged up, Allen missed some time, but like the injury excuse, you can't really use it for Cleveland for where I thought they would be. I mean, they were a 60 plus win team last year. They were my pick to go to the finals. I thought, obviously they fell victim to Indiana's miracle run last year, right? But they also knocked off the Knicks, and they knocked off some other teams along the way. So I thought the playoff bugaboos were a little overrated with the Cavs, and they were just going to be able to figure it out because they were so talented. My belief in Donovan Mitchell, but this year just hasn't been gelling. I mean, the Lonzo experiments has not gone well. He's kind of fallen out of the rotation here. Maybe there could be moves to make if they finally do want to move on from a Jared Allen and push Mobley to the 5. There's options for them to rebuild. But honestly, if I was, not in podcast hibernation right now, I would have called up some folks in Cleveland to try to get somebody on the horn and be like, hey, what's going on? Because I'm sitting here, I still don't fully understand why they are, so much worse than where they were last year. I mean, people forget that at this time last year, they were in the same tier as OKC. They might have even had like a better record. Like they were easily that new first class in the NBA. And for them to just be a middling team and an even weaker Eastern Conference this year, I'm just really disappointed because that's a team that I did believe in as a contender. And, I sit here and there's like 3 other teams in the East I like more than them right now.
Yeah, the Cavs have been very confusing. I don't I kind of agree with you. I don't totally know like why they've been this inconsistent and mediocre. Like they're 8-11 since November 23rd. That's a almost month and a half span where they're multiple games below 500. Like they had a plus 9.5 net rating last year, which I believe was like top 15 all time. Like that's not some number that you just kind of casually toss around. Like if you're close to the double digits in net rating, like that's some historic stuff right there. And I will say I think part of the reason why I did expect some regression.
Yeah.
I don't think this hard, but I think that like 64 wins, they were playing a little above their skis, if we're being totally honest. Like Mitchell is phenomenal, but the fit with him and Garland, the fit with Mobley and Allen, like these have been talked about for a while now. Like it's like I hate to like bring it back to that, and it's been like the lazy narrative with this team, but it's like there are moves to make, and I think that they're delaying those moves as long as they can because they're tough decisions to make. Obviously, all four of those guys are really, really good players, but this season, like they just, other than Mitchell's been like fantastic this year, but the other three guys have just not lived up to their end of the bill. Like Mobley has totally stagnated this season in a way where like it's not like he's been bad, but I've been told by other podcasters that this guy should get comped to Kevin Garnett and Giannis and all this stuff, like a top 15 player in the NBA. I personally did not go that far when I did my top 100 rankings. I think I had him in the 25 range, and I was like, all right, let's pump the brakes a little because I still think he's just a little limited offensively. Like he's ultimately a complementary offensive player, which like, again, he is a very, very good offensive player still, an elite defensive player. But how many top 15 players are complementary offensive players? Not many, if any. So I'm just like, I don't know if maybe that ceiling's there. I personally haven't really seen enough to think that it's definitely there. And like, he's still young, but like, it just feels like he obviously took a little bit of a leap up last year, but this year he feels like he's almost like a little worse than last season. Again, still a good player, but when's he going to hit from high volume consistently outside? When is he going to be able to like give me the ball and I can go create my own shot? Like that's the part of his game that I have seen nothing that makes me think he's going to be able to do that, even in his prime. And if he can't do that, then again, he's probably more of a complimentary guy. Garland is having probably his worst season of the last 2 or 3 years. Garland's a guy I actually love. I'm probably higher on him than consensus, but I think it's just a weird situation where Mitchell is just going to have the ball so much and he's trying to fit in. And it's just like, he'd probably be better with his own team as like the main ball handler. Again, I don't think he's like the guy on a championship team or anything like that, but he should be the guy with the ball in his hands more often than not. And then Jared Allen has almost been like relegated to this like replacement level starting center this season. Like his stats are down, like his efficiency's way down. Like this is a guy that was in an all-star game not that long ago. And it feels like he is so far removed from that right now.
Yeah. And that's like the scary thing is I couldn't agree with you more on the Mobley piece. And honestly, that's a guy that like I actually kind of questioned my knowledge of basketball, the way people talked about him. I'm like, am I watching like the wrong Cavs game? Like, am I on League Pass on the wrong nights? Like, and not that I ever thought he was bad, but I'm like, to just like project this insane growth for this guy, just adding these layers to his game as a creator. I'm like, those aren't skills that develop overnight, and it's been a couple like long enough, and especially as a big man, when you have like, you know, well above average like ball handlers on your team that, you know, can handle the ball at the end of these games, you're not like investing in him like that. So like, even if they were to make that move that everyone's been speculating of like moving on from Jared Allen, who, you know, despite the regression this season, I still think there'd be a strong market for. I mean, there's a million teams out there that need a rim protector and, you know, front.
The contract's decent too.
Yeah, like
which is all that matters these days.
Exactly. So I'm like, he's still like a plus asset that teams would be lining up for, I think, you know, as long as he can stay healthy. So, you know, with that in mind, it's like Cleveland has moves to make. They're not like a dead man walking, but it's just so disappointing. And not to mention, like they're getting production from guys like Jalen Tyson, who's been awesome for them. And it's like, that's a guy that wasn't in the rotation last year. And like Naquan Tomlin, their rookie that they drafted, like he's been productive too. Like they have guys that I like that they've added to the rotation. I mean, I'm just like, was Ty Jerome that important? Like, do people hate DeAndre Hunter that much? I'm like, what's going on in that locker room? Like, did Kenny Atkinson lose the touch? It's very bizarre, especially when you consider like, I lay none of this blame at the feet of Donovan Mitchell for how awesome he's been. And maybe that's part of the story is just that like they're asking him to do too much because he was, you know, when they were playing their best basketball, he was somehow only like a 22 point a game guy, and now he's up to 30. But the Cavs thing is fascinating. I do want us to watch them down the stretch, but you know, for me, they were my easy answer here for most of this point.
Yeah, and I think it's fair because let's not forget they were the favorites in the East. It was
Hmm.
like them or the Knicks, and most people leaned to the Cavs, and the Cavs were Vegas favorites. And back to the Mitchell point, like he's been so good, but I feel like the other guys have been so just leaving something to desire that he has sort of had to revert to some of his bad habits. Where like for as good as Mitchell is, he does the like one man show tunnel vision a
Yeah.
little bit sometimes. And like he can do it. And he's at his best when he's not doing that all the time. Sometimes he has to do hero ball a little bit. But this is the highest usage he's had since he's been in Cleveland. And look, Donovan Mitchell, very good player, but the high usage hero ball Mitchell teams have just simply not had high level success. Like he's in year 9 now. He's not made it out of the second round, which I think it doesn't get talked about enough. Like obviously a really good player. I'm not gonna put it all on him, but like he's had a top 5 to 10 defense basically every team he's ever been on in his career. He's had good coaching. You could argue he hasn't really had the offensive help around him, and that's kind of why they haven't been able to get over the hump. But I think a lot of it is because he feels like he is obligated to do more when the team doesn't have it. And it just that's not a winning formula, as I think you and I and most people know. Like when you get these heliocentric guys that are so just heads down, I'm going to make something happen. Like we've just seen that not be successful. Harden, Russ back in his prime, even Luka at times. Like when they made the finals, that was the lowest usage he had in the playoffs in any playoff run of his career. And it's not a coincidence. Like because Kyrie was doing more and they were relying more on the role players, and so like that stuff matters. And so I don't know. I've been skeptical about Cleveland for years now. They've kind of been on fraud watch for me. Last year, I picked the Pacers over them in the second round, and all season I was like, I don't know. I was like,
Yep.
we've got 2-year playoff sample size, and it didn't look good either time. Can I see it before I trust it? And now we've got 3-year sample size of it not looking good in the playoffs. So like, I've just formally been out on them until like prove me wrong is kind of where I'm at. Like the Knicks were my pick preseason out of the East just because I was like, I can't in good faith like pick Cleveland when one, Donovan Mitchell's never even made it out of the second round, and two, like this team for 3 years in a row now has fell flat in a way that it wasn't like it's not just like they lost. They looked ugly doing so all 3 times.
Yeah. I just felt like they were just too talented to be this predictable at the end of games offensively. You know what I mean? And I thought that they would I am a Mitchell guy, if you couldn't already tell. Like, I just enjoy, and I think that's like the Hooper in me that just loves the highlights. And I'm like, I can't blame the guy when, like, he must walk into every gym like I can get any shot I want at any time.
It's
you know
so
what I mean?
impressive
Like,
at his size too. Like, I mean,
insane.
yeah.
Because he's an above the rim player at that size that
Mm-hmm.
just has every move that you can imagine, and he can obviously score at all 3 levels. Where it's like, but you're right, it's predictable, it's heliocentric, and there's a reason that this team has disappointed. So I can see you're less surprised than I am, and that's probably why I had him here and you didn't. But I think that they're certainly in this conversation for sure.
Oh, again, they were my second pick. I don't want to like let them off the hook because like they were favorites in the East. Like the favorite in the conference
and they're
is 4 games above 500.
Like they were.
Yeah.
They almost dropped the game to the Spurs that would have put them below 500. I was like watching that game. I'm like, are they going to be below? Like, that's insane to me. But again, a lot of season left. So we'll see if I would, if I was Cleveland, what I'll leave it at is like, I do think that they need to change something with that team. Like they have enough assets. This is still their window to win the East, you know, despite how it's gone. So I'd be pretty disappointed if they didn't try to do at least something around the fridges to improve their team at the deadline.
Yep. Okay. Moving to my pick. I had the Los Angeles Clippers, who I think the reason I didn't pick the Cavs is because if we're being honest, they could go on an 8-game win streak and they'd be like the 3 seed. And then this would be a silly conversation in 2 weeks versus the Clippers, who they started the season 6-21, which like, I think if you had asked preseason, like what is the worst possible start the Clippers could have through 27 games? Like how many wins? I feel like we would have said like 11-16 or something. Like
10,
like
maybe.
Like 6-21. That is like that's hard to do for especially with how much talent they have. They lost last night, but they had won 7 of 8 before that, and they were the second best net rating in that stretch. So they have since turned it around a bit. But that's the thing. You put yourself in a 6-21 hole, it's going to be nearly impossible to come out of it. And so I was not overreacting early. I did like a sample size podcast back in mid-November that was like, is it too early to say that the Clippers are not a playoff team? And I said, yes, it was too early. I still think they maybe could sneak in. As long as they get in the plan, then anything can happen. And they're really not far out of the plan right now, just given that. But they are 10 games back at the 6th seed. So like kiss any outright playoff hopes completely goodbye. Like that's not happening. Their best case is a play-in and then winning a couple games there. And the weirdest thing with that is I'm like, Kawhi is having just a phenomenal season. He's averaging a career high in points, 28 a game, and he's
28.
Leads the NBA in steals, leads the NBA in free throw percentage, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Like this might be the best he's played since like Toronto or something like that, which is just insane to say. Like if you had told me that he was going to get that kind of season, and then Harden's also averaging like 25, 26, which is the most he's averaged in like, I don't even 5+ years or something like that. I think since Houston, that's the most he's averaged. And so those things combined, there's just absolutely no reason they should be 6-21. I don't care that, they've had some weird stuff with Chris Paul and that, they've had some injuries and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, there's no excuse for 6-21. Like if you're that bad with those two guys, it is an effort thing. It is a chemistry thing. It is whatever. Like that is like bottom feeder, top 3 pick in the league level record. So
yeah, you know what? That's on me for forgetting how bad the Clippers were. I was like that. Yeah. I shouldn't have made the Cavs seem as obvious as they were because the Clippers have been awful. I think I actually thought about them, then I was kind of awarded them partial credit, so to speak, for them playing actually really good basketball over the past couple of weeks, and I don't know what to do with that. But yeah, the fact that they have been balling out lately and they're still 10 games under 500 is absurd. There's just no excuse. And it's hard to bash them too much for the decisions they made in the offseason because they're obviously over leveraged with this, until Kawhi's contract runs out. Like this is what the team is going to be. And they have this new arena and they have the All-Star game and they're trying to play well to get people to forget about their scandals in the offseason. So it's just been a brutal time to be a Clippers fan. I do believe what I've seen from Kawhi Leonard. And I never really fully understood why they were so bad to begin with. And that's why I'm like kind of holding my breath just because the East has been kind of deeper than the West this year. Once you get like outside of like the top 5, I guess you could say. So I do think there's a world in which they climb their way back in. But you're right. I mean, they're going to be a play-in team at best. They're not going to be a top 7 seed. Like some real crazy shit would have to happen there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's beyond disappointing for a team that is built around these veterans where like you don't expect them to be this inconsistent. And that start is just inexcusable.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the offseason because if you just look at their moves, like honestly, I really liked their offseason. I thought on paper they were better in a lot of ways. I thought the way they used the assets was smart. Like I at least saw the vision with like, oh, let's trade Norman Powell for John Collins and then sign Beals to be like the Powell replacement. Yep. And then you're like, okay, you've got this new kind of diverse big forward that we haven't had on the team. And then Beals should ideally do what Powell's done. But none of it's come to fruition. I mean, I think Powell's probably going to be an all-star in the East this year.
So good.
He's
I'm a Powell guy. That's been my guy. I love that guy. And that's just like the Hooper brain. And now it's actually aligning with like the winning basketball side of things are coming into place for him too. He's awesome. So you're right. That's been the killer for them this season for sure.
Yeah, and then Beal was just, I mean, I know he's out for the season, but he was a disaster when he played. I mean, the numbers weren't great, but it's not even about the scoring. Like, he was, the him and Harden combo when they were on the court together, like, defensively was just, it was untenable. Like, they were so bad defensively with those guys out there. Like, just not feasible to have them out at any point. Like, Chris Paul, obviously not on the team anymore, wasn't in the rotation to begin with. Brook Lopez looks very, very washed. I think he's shooting below 40% from the field on the season. And then Collins has been like fine, like pretty solid, but he just hasn't been good enough to offset the other moves that were just complete misses. And again, I don't really fault them. I mean, I will say this, maybe they should have tried to get some guys that were a little bit younger, very, very old roster, but I don't fault them on paper, like talent wise. Like I thought they were better on paper, like just top to bottom 10-man rotation in general coming into this year. But I think they skewed a little bit too much offense heavy and not enough defense heavy. And of course Derek Jones Jr. been hurt for a big chunk of the year, so that's been a big loss as well. But then they were like playing Beal over Chris Dunn, which is just like that's on Ty Lue. Like as I was maybe ready for Beal to come back and be like, okay, well he's not what he was, but he can still be a contributing player. Like I'm fully out now. Like I don't.
Yeah, it's
like I don't want him anywhere near my team. No, everywhere he goes turns to shit. So I don't. I don't want anything to do with him. Cool. All right, next we'll do best ahead of schedule ascension. So a young team that has ascended maybe quicker than we expected and that you are very impressed by. And I'll let you go first.
So I feel like this one, kind of low hanging fruit here, considering they're your 2 seed in the Western Conference. But I got to talk about the Spurs, man. Like I can't
I
say
had the
that
same
I'm,
team.
yeah, man. I mean, I can't say that I'm totally like shocked by any means. Like again, that there is no ceiling for Victor Wembanyama, but like you just didn't know exactly when that leap was coming. And the coolest thing about the Spurs this year is that it's not just about Wemby, right? Like he's missed a huge chunk of games and been on minutes restrictions and whatnot. And it's really cool to see this team that a lot of the guys that are contributing are guys that were on the team when they were complete shit, like guys like Keldon Johnson that have stuck around and Champagnie that have been, proven role players. Like the future for this team is so bright. Even with the Fox move, which kind of seemed like a luxury trade for them at times, where like, do we even need De'Aaron Fox with how great Castle's been and having the opportunity to take Harper second in the draft? He's been able to carry them through late game stretches and especially in those games without Wemby. I just feel like this team, in addition to the fact that they just seem to have the number of the best team in the NBA, the Thunder, they're 3-0 against them this year, which has been well documented. Like, yeah, this team is a real threat. Like, you want to talk about a team that has no comparison when you have Wemby as your best player. Like, I think they're a team, if I really had to name, maybe a third or like fourth contender outside of like OKC and Denver, I think the Spurs are right there. And you could have also told me that they would have missed the playoffs this year. So that's why their ascension is really cool to see. And they were an obvious choice for me for this one.
Yeah, it was my pick as well. Because it's not just that they're like 26 and 11, 2 seed, et cetera. It's that they're 10-4 without Wembanyama this year. Like that is not something I thought was feasible for them. But then even when he has played, I complained about him last year a little bit, where he was just so jump shot happy. And I was like, dude, you are 7'6", like alien freak on the court. Like just go to the basket. And he has adjusted accordingly. I mean, last year he had 44% of his shots were from three. That's absurd. 44%. 4 out of 9 shots. Nearly half of his shots were from three, which is just like he has no business taking that many 3-pointers when he's that big. And like, sure, he can make them, but he's not that good at threes. Like he's like league average 3-point shooter. Yep. So this year, only 22% of his shots are from three. So he has cut his rate from three in half, and he's shooting about the same percentage. So it's like, it's not like he's some big increased volume there, but he's just taking more efficient shots in general. So last year he took 27% of his shots at the rim. This year he's 39%. So he's basically flip-flopped those stats. He's taking a little bit more mid-range as well, but he's a little more efficient from mid-range than from three anyway. So that is such an important shift for his development. And to me, coming into the season, I was like, could he win MVP? And I was like, that to me was the key, is like, can he shift his shot profile to lean into what makes him so unique? Like nobody can stop him at the rim. I know he's still a little frail, but I'm like, once he's within 2 feet, like it's a wrap. You know what I mean? Like the ball's going in because no one can even come close to blocking it. And so he's played at an MVP level when he's played, at least in full minutes. He's had a minutes restriction for weeks now and been coming off the bench. And there were jokes about him winning 6-man, which I don't think he's going to come off for enough games, but 6 in a row now. So we'll see. But yeah, Fox has been solid, like you mentioned. I also think Castle is a big part of their ascension here. I was a little skeptical on Castle after last year just because his jump shot is still very, very much broken. He's 27% from three this year. Like, I think that's going to really, really limit what his ceiling can be. Like, if he's a guard that is sub 30% from three, like he's going to, it's going to cause them issues, especially come playoff time where they're just going to dare him to shoot. But aside from that, like he's been way better than I thought he was even going to be, taking a step up this year, like 18.7 assists. That's really impressed me. Like he was advertised as a pseudo point guard coming out of college when I did like my draft profile and like preview and stuff, I was like, let's be real, guys. This guy's not a point guard. Like, he's like his best case in my mind was like Iguodala type in terms of like the way he can run some offense, but he's not like your point guard. But they were saying he's a point guard. But he's done a lot of that kind of stuff. I think Iguodala is a good comp for him still, because not the best shooter, can hit it sometimes, but you can run some offense through him. He's like very strong going to the basket, and he's been a nice secondary scorer for them. And then lastly, you touched on Dylan Harper, but he seems like a legit dude in my opinion. Like it just, I know the stats aren't insane right now. Like the shooting is like a little like below average or whatever, but like if you just watch him eye test wise, like he's had some games this year where you're like he can just get to the basket whenever he wants, and he's finishing with both
him and
hands.
Castle just they live at the rim. They can just
I know.
they can get to the paint and they totally break the defense down, and then they're getting the perimeter shooting from Barnes and Champagny, where it's like the team makes sense, right? Not to cut you off, but I'm so impressed by like that future core of Castle, Harper, and Wemby. Like it's just people are going to be dealing with it forever, and it's going to be really scary if one of those two young guards, develops that outside shot, because then it's just game over. Because I do think it's coming. I think they're too talented to not at least figure it out somewhat from outside.
Yeah, and I think the reason they fit this so well, the category, because I had them as a playoff team preseason, but I had them, I believe, as like 7 seed or something, and I thought this would be a really nice stepping stone season for them.
Exactly,
get into the playoffs, like be a frisky team that maybe wins one more game than we expected in the first round before they end up losing. They take some battle scars, they build on it, they come back next year. But no, they skipped those steps, similarly to how OKC did. I mean, they were in the play-in 3 years ago and then jumped right up to the 1 seed. And so I think that they're officially like a serious like team. Like I mean, to me, after Denver and OKC, like you mentioned, like I don't know if I'd put them third, but they got to at least be in the discussion, like because especially with how well they've played OKC. And I will be wary a little bit because I kind of hate when people talk about like, oh, well, we killed this team during the regular season going into like a playoff matchup, because I'm like, there's no correlation. I mean, last year Celtics went 4-0 versus the Knicks and then got their ass kicked. But it happens all the time.
I'm aware.
My Suns 2 years ago, they were 4-0 against the Timberwolves in the regular season, and then they got swept. So I'm like, there's no correlation whatsoever. So I'm not going to put too much stake into this, but I will say, the fact that it was like a in-season tournament game where in theory there should be a little bit more stakes on it, that didn't mean nothing to me. And 2 of the games have been blowouts. And, I feel like just the fact that like going into that third game, first of all, it was Christmas Day. Second of all, if you're OKC, you got to be like, all right, guys, we got to beat these guys. Like, come on, they beat us 2 in a row, and they still couldn't do it. So like that means a little bit to me because all the games are so close together versus when they're spread out. It's like, we don't even remember what the last game was. But so I think it was on their mind. So yeah, I've been super impressed with San Antonio, and I think that they were the obvious choice for this. But I will touch on my second pick, which is the Detroit Pistons, which I am embarrassed to say that I predicted regression for Detroit coming into the season. I actually had them missing the playoffs, so that was obviously a bad take. Look, when we get these teams that kind of pop out of nowhere like they did last year, it's like we expect them to, take that next leap, but it's often not linear. Like it's kind of like a 50-50 shot. Sometimes they do what the Pistons are doing now. And sometimes we realize like, oh, like that was kind of a weird outlier. Like think about Orlando last year. Like everybody thought, oh, they were the 5 seed last year. They're only going to be better. Like people had them 50 plus wins, top 4 seed, and they were a 500 team. They had a worse record. They were in the plan and they were just kind of met all year. And so like, it's not always linear, these development, but it has been for the Pistons because they've been really, really good this year. Cade has been awesome, following up his All-NBA season last year. The efficiency was not great to start the year, but he's been a lot better recently. I think that one game he had earlier this year was the most hilarious stat line I've ever seen. Was like 50 points on, or was it 50 or 60 points
I think it was 40 points on like 40. He missed more shots than anybody else in NBA history in that overtime game against the Wizards, and people are like, "The fuck? Like what happened?"
That
there?
was
Like
pretty hilarious.
That one I gave him credit for because he was like limping around. Like there were so many guys out, and he's like, I got to keep chucking because if I don't, nobody else will. And they won. So I was like, you know what? We'll take it. We'll take
doing
it.
his best Kobe impression. But aside from him, Jalen Duren has taken a noticeable leap this year. I think he probably is on his way to making the All-Star team this year. Yep. But I will say, I don't want to be negative here, but I still am like not totally bought in on the Pistons. Like for San Antonio, the reason they were my clear pick over Detroit, even though Detroit's got a better record and they're in the East, so in theory, like could be easier path to the postseason. But I still feel like they were a consideration for the one piece away team for me as well, because I still think it is so Cade reliant, this offense. Yes. And I feel like they're just missing firepower on that end of the court. You know, they're 26th in 3-pointers made, 28th in 3-pointers attempted. Ivy has been like a role player since coming back. Like he's 17 minutes a game, which is like not great. And the offense in the postseason last year was like pretty rough. You know, Cade last year in the postseason was 5 for 28 from 3. That's 18%. He had 5 turnovers a game. His offensive rating was 103, which is really not a good number. As a team, they're only 32% from 3, 109 offensive rating, so not great. So I just get worried that if it's too much of one guy, not enough diversity, like they have one player outside of Cade that's averaging even 14 or more points and has 20% or more usage, and it's Duren. But the context of that is that like Duren is only getting his shots when Cade gives him the ball. Like Duren is not like a dump it down in the post or like let him create his own shot. So like he's the only guy that's getting those kind of touches and making those kind of shots and having that kind of usage, but it's still running through Cade. So that's additional usage on Cade. So I'm like, they do not have another guy in the team that's even hitting that 14-point mark or 20% usage. And so I'm like, the next 3 double-digit scores they have are Duncan Robinson, Oscar Thompson, and Tobias Harris. And consider me not inspired by that trio. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it is so fascinating that, like, yes, you know, Cade took a leap, Duren took a leap, and I do kind of believe in their team just because I think I could not really be much higher on Cade Cunningham. I just think he's fantastic, and I think the identity of the team makes sense. Like, they're like the, you know, first team you would draft for like getting off the bus. You're like, I don't want to play those guys. Like everyone's huge.
What do you mean? That's the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah. Yeah. Besides the Suns, of course, you see Gillespie and Grayson Allen, you know, getting off the bus. You're like, yeah, I could probably hold my own out there. But no, I mean, Detroit's got this attitude to them that's very fitting of the city that they play in. And I just kind of respect it. But you're right. Outside of Cade and Duren, like nobody's really ascended the way that I thought or even had hoped, or like, you know, I think guys like obviously the jury's not out on guys like Thompson and Holland and Ivy that have time to develop, but you're absolutely right. Like the rest of that team could definitely see them kind of falling into like the one piece away, especially because like their offseason like wasn't anything crazy. I didn't mind, you know, just
I didn't like it. That's why I picked them to regress. I was like, I think they downgraded across the board, and so they're really relying on internal.
Yeah, and the Malik Beasley thing is so weird. Like that's like the gambling situation really takes him out of the mix. But like he was just way better than what Duncan Robinson has been this year, and they're paying way more for Robinson. You know, I don't blame them for like taking a flyer on LeVert and having Ivy. You know, he's coming back. Like one of those guys might be like, you know, an option to survive the non-Cade minutes and give him like another ball handler even when Cade's in the game. But you're right. Like, you know, everyone's penciling them in for like a Michael Porter Jr. or something like that. That could make them really frisky. I kind of believe in the identity that they have, and I like them, and I think they've made a real ascension. But I ultimately went with the Spurs over them just because I think what the Spurs are doing in the West, I just believe in a little bit more long term than, you know, them just being on the top of a crapshoot East right about now.
Yep. Okay. I know we're coming up on time, so we'll do one more, and we will do team that is most at a crossroads. So this is someone that's kind of stuck, may need to make some tough decisions in the near future, but whatever they decide to do, there's not a lot of options moving forward. So who do you have for this?
Okay. So maybe I'm being a little too harsh here, but I want to find a way to kind of shoehorn in this team. So I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm going to say the Lakers because I think the Lakers, I mean, obviously they are committed to a future that has Luka Doncic. I'm not saying that they should do anything stupid. And I understand that their record is really good right now, but I just think that there are 5 other teams in the Western Conference that I like so much more in a playoff setting that in theory, you're looking at Luka, who's in the prime of his career, LeBron, who's obviously in his final years now, maybe even his final year. That's definitely not, but whatever. We'll say LeBron's in the twilight of his career. Like you would think that team is doing everything in their power to go all in. But I don't really know what their moves are to be made. Like this is just, I just think the NBA is built around depth and defense and athleticism more than it's ever have. I just think the game is so physically demanding to play. And the fact that the Lakers are effectively like 5 guys deep that you trust. Now, 3 of those guys are supremely talented. Like teams would be lining up to get the offensive production you get from Luka and Reeves and LeBron. But I don't like the rest of that team at all. And I would just take Houston, Minnesota, San Antonio, Denver, OKC in a heartbeat over the Lakers in a playoff series. So I'm just like, not that they have to do anything crazy, because again, they made that incredible move to get Luka last year. But I just, as far as the team that's like cosplaying as a contender, if you were to just parachute in and look at the names on paper and see where they are in the standings, I just don't really believe in the Lakers. So it's just kind of interesting if they leverage LeBron as an asset, if they can, if they make some moves around the fringes, if LeBron's going to do the thing that he always does where he talks shit about the front office until they make a move at the deadline, if they even listen to that. I just don't really know what their next move should be, but I know that I don't believe in this team as a contender as currently constructed. So that's why I put them here.
See, this is why I was going to put them as my dark horse contender, because I know that there's probably a lot of people that share the same opinion as you do. But a couple things I'll say. One, I hear you on the roster. It's flawed. It's got holes. The defense sucks. But I'll also say that Luka Doncic made the conference finals with Dwight Powell as his starting center. He made the conference finals with Reggie Bullock as his starting. Like we've seen him do more with less is all I will say. And I do not think that the record is an accident, even though the numbers say that they are well overperforming. This is actually a crazy stat. They have not lost a game by single digits this year. Every single loss they've lost by double digits.
Sounds about right.
But I think that there's context to that of I feel like this is true for a Luka team and especially a LeBron team, where the nights they don't have it, they're kind of like, know, that's fine. Let's just pull the plug. And so I think they do that more than most teams. And I don't mean that in a they're out there on the court not trying anymore, but I think that JJ's just got a quick hook on all right, we're down 20 in the third, whatever, we'll just bench the starters for the fourth. And I'm like, maybe they could win some of those games or at least make them interesting. I don't know. That's just a theory. Obviously, there's no real things to back that up, but I just feel like I've seen that out of LeBron and Luka teams in the past specifically. But where I will also get pushback a little bit there is they have more flexibility than I think we realize they do, at least after the season. In season, they don't have, who knows, but let's say LeBron walks or whatever, maybe he's out on the market, realizes there's no real money out there for him. He signs for the mid-level exception or something like that. Suddenly they've got, good amount of cap flexibility. They're going to have to sign Reeves, obviously, but I believe by the offseason, they'll have another draft pick they could trade. They might have up to 3 firsts to be able to trade or something like that in the offseason. Who's to say they can't throw Hachimura, some fillers, 3 picks for a Jaren Jackson Jr., for example, like we talked about. I think while I agree, we agreed that we're not the biggest fans. I think him and a team with Luka, for example, with a guy like Reeves, that's a perfect fit for him where he really doesn't have to do much offensively, just space the floor, protect the rim. They probably, whether they bring Ayton back or get another center, whatever. I just think that there is moves to be made for the Lakers where if they add a guy of that caliber that at least fits the team and solves some of their needs, specifically on the defensive end, to me, they're just immediately that team. I think they're very legitimate contender, in my opinion, if they were to add somebody like him. Just an example. But that's why for this category, I've got some other teams where I'm I don't see any world where they're truly contending in the next year or two. And given the age of some of the guys on the roster, I think that, it's it has to be in the next year or two, or else it's
totally
going to happen.
Totally. No, I like that. I just feel like the Lakers are. I wanted to find a way to talk about them because they're so fascinating here, and I just feel like again they don't. To me, they just don't fit with that meta of the NBA. I'm talking about.
I get it.
It's just, especially when you get into the playoffs. You know what I mean? When guys are it's turned up, but
it's athleticism, it's defense, it's all things that they just don't have. I will say though, if they have first round pick to trade right now, if they could spin that into a Herb Jones, I'd feel a lot better about him in the Vanderbilt spot. Essentially, of course he's not solving all their problems, but having that kind of point of attack defender next to those guys can fill a lot of gaps with the defense, at least in some lineups. So I hear, and I know that I think I'm very much in the minority on this. I think most people are in the Lakers or frauds camp right now, which is why I'm kind of choosing to zag a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm preseason, the preseason stuff is crazy. I saw people had them 6, 7 seats. Bill Simmons picked them to miss the playoffs completely.
That's crazy. It's
which is
Luka's
insane.
Not missing
I know.
The playoffs unless he gets hurt. He's not. They're not. No Luka Doncic team.
Insane. He had Dallas ahead of them. I was like, come on, man. This is just you. You're just hating. But regardless, I had them as a 3 seed, so I was higher than consensus coming into the year as well. I just I don't know. a fully healthy, engaged Luka Doncic, like to me, doesn't need that much around him to be like a lock for a top 4 or 5 seed. And then in the playoffs, like, unless he's playing some super level team like the maybe OKC and then, like Boston a couple years ago, like I just think he's got a chance in any series, legitimately.
Yeah,
and does. I can't say, I don't think that's true for Minnesota, for example. Like I don't think they have a chance in any series, but because I think Ant is just not at that level. But obviously, like a lot of things have to go right. But it's not like he's got bums next to him. I mean, Reeves could make All NBA this season, and LeBron really struggled to start the year. But in his last 12, he's 26, 6-6 on 55%. So like he's been really solid since, kind of getting his feet under him, which by the way, I'm like, I don't blame the guy who didn't play for like 7 months, no training camp, no preseason, no ramp up, no nothing. And he's 41 years old now, but like give him a little bit of time. And I think like, look, if LeBron can lean into this, like almost like a overqualified Draymond Green of sorts for them, then I'm like, which of course I don't think he's ever going to be like that kind of defender right now. But if you watch the playoffs last year, like he was their best defender, and like he was like competing on that end and playing his ass off, and like actually looked pretty good in that role. They just didn't have enough around them, and they didn't play a single sub in the second half of one of those games. So like it's a lot to ask, but I'm just saying that I see a path for them to be competitive, and I think they can beat probably any non OKC or Denver team right now in the postseason. And then, we'll see what happens with those teams and if they add somebody or whatever. But if the bracket falls their way, I could see them in the conference finals. But again, I think I'm in the minority. I think most people would agree with you on this. So
yeah, I think most of my, me being bearish, I guess we'll say on them, is mostly rooted in this season. I think you just kind of laid out with the picks that they have, like they have Luka, like they have a crafty front office, and they have a very desirable place that people are always lining up to play. Like they're going to be fine in the long term. I just think this year, this team is not what I would in a perfect world have around Luka. Like there is talent, but it's just not set up in a way that I think complements Luka or complements what it takes to win, this year in the NBA, I guess.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right. My last two, I'm kind of split on who to talk about, so I'll let you decide. I had the Bucks and the Warriors. So who would you rather discuss?
Let's go Warriors, because I was it was a coin flip for me to say like Warriors team. I think the long-term outlook of the Warriors is a bit more grim than the Lakers. So
I think the Bucks the Bucks are almost like there's not that much to talk about, because it's like
exactly
they're going to trade Giannis, they're not going to trade Giannis. Like they're I don't know what's going on with them. Well, I do know, and they just don't have that much talent, and they have one single tradable first, and as soon as they use that, they are totally cooked. So, let's do the Warriors then. They're 20-18. They're the 8 seed right now. They're 5 games back of the 6 seed, so they're digging themselves quite a hole to avoid the play-in, which kind of felt like that was their issue last year, where it's like they were 500 for most of the year. They traded for Jimmy Butler. They had to sprint to the finish line when most other teams were kind of coasting. And so they played really well down the stretch, but then they put themselves in a position where suddenly now we've got to win a play-in game. Now we've got to play a 2 seed. So we go 7 games. Like they were probably better than a 7 seed last year, but because they were in that hole, it was just an uphill battle the rest of the way. This year, I don't think that hole is because they aren't trying. I mean, last year they didn't have Butler, so they just weren't very good, but I worry that it's a little bit because they just aren't that good this year either. I mean, they're a full 3 games back of just the Suns, 7 seed, which of course, I mean, a lot of season left. And for all we know, the Suns could fall way back to earth and Warriors easily get the 7 seed. This would be less of a discussion. But the weird thing is that Steph has been awesome. I mean, he's averaging 29 a game on his normal, Steph level efficiency. The on-off stuff when he's off the court offensively, they fall off the cliff. Jimmy's stat line has actually been pretty good, 26 and 5 on 50, almost 50, 40, 90, which is crazy because he's not, I mean, the volume's low and the 3-point shooting, obviously. But I think the biggest reason they are where they are is because Draymond this year seems like he's really done more bad than good. I think the on-off stuff is not kind to him this year. I believe they've been better defensively when he's off the court versus on the court, which is like, that's saying a lot for a guy like him. I mean, like I will go to my grave saying this, that at least for this, I think he's the best defensive player of this generation. But like, to me, he's an all-time defender and he's super unique in what he does. And like, even as recently as last season, like, I mean, he was great for them defensively, especially in the playoffs too. Like their run at the end of the season was mostly because they were just a top 5 defensive team. once Jimmy got there. And a lot of that obviously is because Jimmy, but like Draymond's the core of this defense and what makes them so good there. And he was playing center for them basically the entire, second half of the season. And so that has really been the biggest thing. But then, Kuminga, he is what he is at this point, and what he is just not very good at basketball, unfortunately, I think. And you talked about sort of the ethos of the, NBA right now, and like what all the best teams have in common. And the Warriors don't have anything in common with those teams because they're small, they're slow, they're old, and that's just not what wins in the NBA today. I mean, their top 3-4 guys are ancient. Horford was supposed to be their reliable big. He looks completely washed, like he's got nothing left in the tank. Quentin Post is the only reliable big man they have in the rotation. And I don't even hate most of their I'm like one of the biggest Pajemski fans out there. I really liked Anthony Melton as a role guy. Quentin Post has been like decent. Will Richard, their rookie, has been like way better than they ever could have expected. And so I just don't know. This roster just doesn't seem to fit. And I don't know if it's because the NBA has outgrown their style, or if they just need to add another piece, or what it is. But what are your thoughts?
I think I'm really glad we're talking about this team because it's like, as somebody who Steph is like my favorite player ever, and I'm sure there's millions upon millions of people that feel the same. This is like, despite how awesome he is, this is like the least fun I've had watching the Warriors this year. Like it just feels so stale. And I don't want to like just like come at the top for these teams that's just coming off like the back of this generational run. Like it has to end at some point. If this is the end, so be it. But it feels like the shtick with Steve Kerr is like wearing thin. It certainly is on Warriors fans. If you ever stumble on Warriors Twitter, I wouldn't recommend it. It's a dark place. It's like they got a lot of guys, and I understand that you have to have your system, but it just at some point you just don't have the horses, and especially with the size thing. Like I thought my Celtics were cooked because we didn't have the size early in the season, and we were just getting mauled on the boards until we figured out schematically how we were going to work around that, and then Kata emerged and whatever. But like, not having any traditional big man option to turn to, asking so much of Draymond on the defensive end of the court when he does play to be your anchor at his age, like obviously the regression was going to come at some point. So as much as I believe in Steph, and I still think the Jimmy trade was a solid move, they weirdly find themselves in like the same exact spot they were in the standings around this time last year. And, they need to make a move if they want to contend. But like, despite how great Steph is and Jimmy, like it needs to be one of those splashy trades. Like you need to be getting, like Giannis is obviously not on the table for the assets that they have, but like it needs to be like an Anthony Davis, getting him,
I agree.
30 cents on the dollar. And then, hoping that Dallas is willing to sell him low but outside of that, like if it's just a move that's within reason, that's not Anthony Davis, like I don't know what that move is to make them competitive this year. And again, none of that is at the feet of Steph Curry with how great he's been.
Yeah, it's like, go ahead, get Daniel Gafford. Guess what? You might raise to the 7 seed, and like you're sealing second round. Like it's just, even with that, they shouldn't be content with just being a 6 or 7 seed every single year and losing in the second round. And they do have some assets is the point. Like they've got, I think 3 tradable firsts or something like that. I mean, Kuminga is not my cup of tea, but maybe some team out there would want him.
See, the tough thing about Kuminga is I almost feel like if they were being smart about, like Steve Kerr must have known like years, like probably a year ago at this point, like Kuminga's never going to be my guy. Like the play style differences, his lack of buy-in for the Warriors system, it was never going to work out. But I still am not totally sold that we could have at least like postured him as a player that would have had value, because he had those flashes and he had the pedigree. Like they couldn't just like muscle through playing him a little bit, and like the GM swears like, Steve, I will trade him on November 17th. Like you won't have to like play him a month, and then we'll move on. But it's like they already left him out of the rotation for so long, even when he's been healthy, that like, just like we saw with Trae Young, once you show your hand to the league that like, hey, he's not in our rotation, nobody's paying for him. No, like
maybe
his
the
value
Kings.
is maybe the Kings. You're right. The Kings
can't
and the
rule
Bulls,
them out.
they exist. Yep. So, but besides that, it's like he doesn't have any real value. So you're just attaching his contract and hoping it works out. But it's so grim because and Steph is there's no better update than when you check your phone and Steph has 35 in the third quarter and you're flicking around League Pass and you're like, all right, I get to watch this now. Like he's gonna have 50. Like he's gonna do that a few more times this year. It's gonna be sick. I'm going to be seated for it, but in terms of taking them seriously, like, and even coming up with a move that makes them a contender that doesn't include like an Anthony Davis level player, I'm not sold on them at this point.
I totally agree. And the funny thing is, like, I don't know if you saw this, but Steve Kerr came out with like comments of like, well, like it would be irresponsible for us to give up all our assets for some deal. Like, OKC is really good. And I was like, dude, what are you saying?
Like you just had the best player your franchise will ever have in the twilight of his career, still producing. Like, nobody's going to care if you suck in 2028, as long as you can sleep at night knowing you maximize Steph's prime. And like, obviously they had the 2022 title, but like every move since then, I wish they would turn up the dial to get more aggressive. And maybe they'll prove me wrong, because this team has just found a way to, like, every time we think they're dead, like, come back from it. But they're too old and they're too small.
Well, thank you so much, Nick. I was worried this might go a little long, and it did. So apologies. And I appreciate your time hopping on. But why don't you plug yourself? Where can people find your stuff?
Perfect, man. Well, again, thanks for having me. The wheels are turning. We got the rust off. We're going to be back firing on our feed now. The ideas are flowing, but of course, appreciate you having me on for that. And so if you guys want to listen to my stuff, it's at Words with Wallace. That's WALAS, unique spelling of Wallace there. But yeah, we're trying to get back to weekly episodes here, but Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts, and then, YouTube and all the other social medias, you can find me there as well.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Nick, for hopping on.